Welcome to Terrible Lizards, a podcast about dinosaurs with Dr. David Hone and Izzy Lawrence.
On this week's episode, we talk to Rebecca Hunt Foster about the Dinosaur National Monument. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Terrible Lizards. This is the podcast about dinosaurs, but we also cover dinosaurs and some other stuff. I am Izzy Lawrence, and I know absolutely nothing about dinosaurs that this man, Dr. Dave Hone from Queen Mary University, hasn't repeatedly told me, and I still forget. Hello, Dave.
Hello. I was going to say when you were halfway through that intro, I hope after 5 years you'd learnt something.
You think?
But you finished it off with that I've told you, so hopefully you have worked out a bit.
Oh, this week, we're not actually, you don't have to tell me anything, because I'm going to learn from somebody else, aren't I?
Yes, that's the intention, at least. Long-time listeners will remember that 18 months ago, 2 years ago, I was in Utah for a very, very long overdue trip, going to Dinosaur National Monument and a whole bunch of other places around there. Some of the most quintessential, most almost legendary sites in dinosaur paleontology. You cannot be a dinosaur paleontologist and not think about these places, not know about these places. And unfortunately, one of the things I failed utterly to do there was to catch up with Rebecca Hunt Foster, who's the monument paleontologist at Dinosaur National Monument, because I think I only met her once at SVP, Society of Vertebrate Paleontology Conference in Bristol in something like 2007-8, when I was based in China. So I'd come from China to the UK and she'd come from the Midwest of the US. And then I was in Utah and I went to her monument and then she wasn't there, so I didn't get to meet her. So this is the first time I've spoken to Rebecca we've chatted and exchanged emails and all the rest, but it's the first I've actually had a conversation in years. So she can tell me all the stuff that she should have told me when I was there, but she didn't bother to turn up. Hello and welcome, Rebecca.
Thank you for having me.
Ships in the night.
Yeah, that is the irony, is that, if you do go somewhere for just a week or so, because people do tend to wander around, it was bad time. And I think I missed John, your other half, as well.
I was going to say, what month were you there?
Oh, something like June, July-ish.
We weren't even in Vernal yet, because we moved to Vernal in August of 2018. So we would have still been down in Moab.
No, this is 2 years ago. So this was...
2 years ago. Oh, okay.
Yeah. But you were...
then we did miss you.
I think both of you were in different places as well. It's not like you'd gone away together. So...
It happens sometimes. He goes and does his field work and I go and do my field work, and we're in two different places, and we got to make it work somehow.
Let's start there. We definitely want to talk about your research and the stuff that you do, but I think you're kind of unusual in as a husband and wife research team. I know of a couple of others. So Jim Clark and Kathy Forster, and then I'm immediately starting to run out.
Ray Rogers and Christy Curry Rogers.
Oh, yeah, of course. And there's that Australian couple whose name escapes me.
Oh, the Vickers.
Yes.
Pat
Vickers, Rich. Yeah, Tom Rich.
Yes.
Yeah, right. But again, not very many. So let's start there. That seems a fun thing.
I mean, my husband and I are both paleontologists, and we met at Society of Vertebrate Paleontology Conference in St. Paul, of all places. So going on our way up to a party. That's how we met at SVP. A mutual friend introduced us in the elevator. And and so we got to know each other, then eventually started dating and got married. We have 2 wonderful kids. And it's always a juggle to try to both be employed in the same place. That can be very difficult. He's a fantastic paleontologist who has done so much, mostly in the Morrison Formation. He's worked on everything from trilobites, and he's currently even has a project working on a Ice Age box. So he's worked on all sorts of things.
That's a much bigger spread than most people ever get close to managing. Sometimes it's like, Dave, do you still do Triassic? I try not to do Triassic. That's a bit too far away from my middle Jurassic happy area.
So trilobites, we're thinking, are they pre-Triassic or are they just Triassic all the way up to 10,000 years ago is basically what I'm hearing.
Oh, yeah. No, he's working on Cambrian trilobites. So very, very old trilobites.
Wow.
Some of the oldest that exist.
Generalist. I love to have a large, broad understanding of history, but that's ridiculous.
Well, we're really lucky because we live in Utah, where we have this enormous rock record exposed. So we have rocks here in the state of Utah that span that entire amount of time. and that aren't vegetated, which is the plus side.
Yeah.
And so that makes it really easy to be able to work on all these different projects. And I know for John working on the trilobites, it's something that he originally started doing when he was an undergraduate student. And he always just kind of carried this love for it and went back to it and wrote a whole book on it. But, his heart's really in the late Jurassic.
So they're not vegetated. Does that mean that, there's no plants growing on them? And what do plants do to fossils?
Plants hide fossils and they eat fossils. And so
they eat them.
We're lucky. They eat them.
Yeah.
So their little roots love to get down inside, especially dinosaur bones, and enjoy all those rich minerals that are inside the fossil. And they can actually destroy fossils.
Yeah,
Wow.
Roots get inside stuff, can absolutely murder them. But yeah, moreover, you would just pick stuff up. I mean, yeah, I'm sure you get it in Utah, but when I've been out in Dinosaur Park in Canada, yeah, you get this beautiful little etching across the surface of the bone where the roots just straight up got to it.
I've seen people pull plants up by the roots and pull up entire fossils. So you always have, if there's a plant near your quarry, you have to have the talk with people about not yanking up the plants. You have to cut their little roots and stems off, and then you deal with that in the lab. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a box full of pieces and not a pretty nice dinosaur bone.
I have a question. The people who might not be familiar. I mean, most people know about the Morrison Formation, but what is strictly the Dinosaur National Monument? What does that mean for those of us who are not, citizens of the United States of America, who might not know of this place?
Yeah, so Dinosaur National Monument is a National Park Service unit, kind of like you would think about Yellowstone or Yosemite or Glacier National Park or Grand Canyon. We are a National Park Service unit. And our park is located in northeastern Utah and northwestern Colorado. And so our park spans 2 states, which is kind of unique. And our park was originally established in 1915 to protect the historic dinosaur quarry that at that time the Carnegie Museum was excavating. And so the park was originally set aside to protect this really rich deposit of late Jurassic dinosaurs. It was later expanded in 1938 to encompass 2 different rivers that are also kind of adjacent to the quarry, and to preserve this wilderness area surrounding that for its natural and cultural importance.
It spans 2 states. So how big is it?
Oh, goodness. I forget the exact acreage. I have to look it up.
But is it like, it could be a village, or it could be a city, or it could be even bigger than that? I mean, I don't know.
It's huge. It's like something like 210,000 acres or something.
Wow.
I would have to
Google. This is rural US. They have space. You're not gonna make an 8-acre national park in Utah.
Acres is quite large, Dave. I don't know about your acreage of your home, but
it's giant. It's bigger than like New York City. So it's a very large area. It's 210,000 acres.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then the actual monument itself, or at least the central quarry, is the bit that I was going to say anyone who's ever looked at a dinosaur book will know. And I think that's one of those statements which sounds almost outlandish. And yet I've got kids' books from, I was going to say 40 years ago. And indeed, they're older than that because they weren't my books. They were my brother's books or my uncle's books. And there's the shot of the great big long quarry with all the bones in it. And yeah, that goes all the way through to at least my penultimate or most recent book where you sent me a photo of it to include. So like even books already a year old, like here's the photo of Dinosaur National Monument quarry with all the bones in it. So like genuinely, if you have almost any kind of book that obviously some of them are just illustrated, but like if there are photos or people digging things up or a big mass of bones, there is I was going to say better than even chance, but it is like 95% chance it's that quarry wall from Dinosaur National Monument.
Yep, absolutely. It's in so many popular paleontology and dinosaur books of this big quarry. And when people think of a dinosaur quarry or any quarry, they often think of something that's flat on the ground. And that's something that's very unique about the Carnegie quarry at Dinosaur National Monument, is that it's tilted up on end. So when you see people working on it, it's almost like they're working on a flat vertical wall full of dinosaur bones. And what that is, why that quarry is there, is that it actually is preserving a giant river channel. And all of these animals died in or near this river channel during a drought. And then the rains returned and their carcasses were moved by water and covered up, sometimes not very far, and covered up and fossilized. And so that's why we have all these different dinosaurs preserved in this one place that's very easily accessible. It was on the kind of the top of a mountain, and they excavated it down so that they could both remove these fossils and take them to various museums. And then also they got to a point where they're like, oh my, there are so many fossils here. This is a really unique opportunity to leave some of these here for people to see. And from the weekend that they began excavating in 1909, they had visitors to the quarry. They had people driving in on their buggies who heard about this. They would come after church in their Sunday best, with their hats and their skirts, and they would, go up to watch these bone diggers and these people actually excavating these fossils. So from the get-go in 1909, it was drawing in people who were curious and interested about what these folks from out east were doing. And so it very quickly became a public site as well.
Is it really just that one event, that one flood? So it really is a snapshot of the animals that were around the time? Or is it several different events, several floods or several droughts?
Exactly. It's a snapshot, and it's probably something that was deposited over several thousands of years.
Wow. That's so cool.
Yeah, it is. It is really, really interesting.
But it's a jumble.
And it's not just, it is jumbled. It's, you find it in this entire river channel. What is inside the quarry building is not the full extent of it. It continues outside of the building and in the rocks as they continue along the outcrop, along the terrain. And then the park is also just very rich paleontologically in general. We have a lot of fossils that have been found in pond deposits adjacent to these lakes, in other areas around the park. And we even have sites that are younger geologically, so early Cretaceous sites that have yielded new dinosaur fossils as well. So it's just a very rich paleontologically important area.
So the thing I was going to ask, well, again, I sort of know, but like the size of this thing, I mean, it's what, 70 meters, 100 meters long?
Yeah.
And 10, 15 high?
Yeah, it's like 2 stories high.
Yeah, to give people the scale of this thing. And then this is the Morrison Formation, which you've talked about many times. So it's dominated by sauropods. So it's not like it's a raft of tiny, diddy little piddly bones. The small bones are 0.5 meter plus. And although it's jumbled and mixed, there are entire vertebral columns, entire limbs, and things like this. And then the bit to ask you, because I know the first half dozen that have run out. So what are all the different species that are just on this slab?
So the main
big slab.
Yeah, it's a big slab. The main dinosaur fossils that are found in the Carnegie Quarry would be the sauropods, Apatosaurus louisei, Barosaurus, Diplodocus, and Camarasaurus. And then you have Stegosaurus, Camptosaurus, and Dryosaurus.
Yep,
and then Yep. And then you get the theropods, you get Allosaurus, Ceratosaurus, and Torvosaurus.
Torvosaurus is in there, but not Martiosaurus.
Not Martiosaurus. Martiosaurus is found just down section of the quarry, but it is found in the park. And then in the quarry as well, we get very abundant uniotid clams, and they're really the one that tell us about this drought event that would take place. And then we also get turtle fossils and crocodile fossils, things like that.
Right, but that's 10 dinosaur species and some of the most, well-known charismatic, Stegosaurus, Allosaurus, Diplodocus. This is a pretty basic list of
all your favorites
of the world's dinosaurs. Yeah, pretty much. And so that alone is incredible. And then the bit that I had certainly missed until I was there is also how many of those things aren't there anymore, because as you were saying, half a dozen or a dozen of the best, most complete things were straight up taken out and went to the Carnegie American Museum of Natural History. I think it's got one. The Royal Ontario Museum, I know their Barosaurus is from there. So
Yeah, we have fossils all over the place.
This is almost what's inverted commas like the leftovers, and
Yes,
it's still
yeah.
all of that stuff. Yeah,
Absolutely. And it's fun too, because we know it continues to go down. If we were to continue excavating the quarry, we know we would find stuff continuing to go down into the ground, and we still do excavate stuff adjacent to the building. So there is still material coming out. The difference is just that when they were excavating the quarry initially, of course, in the early 1900s, they were excavating with the purpose of excavating fossils for display for their museum. So they were definitely going after articulated, semi-articulated, very nicely complete specimens. And as they worked their way down, they found that degree of articulation or put togetherness of these animals decreasing. And that has to do with the way the river channels articulated as well. And the fact that they had so many of these dinosaurs that they had collected that they traded them like baseball cards or Pokemon cards to other museums for other fossils. Then later, the Smithsonian, the Natural History Museum, came in and collected 1 year, and then the University of Utah came in and collected 1 year.
it's phenomenally impressive when you see it. And then, yeah, this is, without disparaging the site, after they took all the best stuff out of it, it's still one of the most impressive fossil sites on Earth. That's how special it is.
And to have this, what we call multi-taxic bone bed, where you get all these different kinds of dinosaurs represented, is also very unusual. A lot of dinosaur bone beds are represented by mostly one kind of dinosaur, sometimes maybe 2 or 3, but to have 10 different types of dinosaurs that are reasonably well represented within this area is pretty not unique, but definitely, a good hallmark of this cool site, and giving it a lot of research potential and importance as well.
Yeah, it absolutely does, because again, it means you've captured something. Again, might be thousands of years, but still you've captured like a point in a way that these don't usually. Because yeah, I worked on the giant Shantungosaurus quarry in eastern China, which is several times the size of yours. And it is 3,000 or 4,000 elements, but like I think we counted 6 tyrannosaur bits, a crocodile bit, and everything else was Shantungosaurus. Now, I like Shantungosaurus as much as the next man, probably more than the next man, but at the same time, it's like, this is a lot of the same stuff, and it really doesn't tell you anything other than what a really big adult Shantungosaurus looks like, which we
get a really good sample size.
Which after about the first 20 or 30 bones we kind of knew. And so it does just, show how really significant that is. Mm-hmm. And again, we've talked about on the podcast the Centrosaurus bone bed in, again, Dinosaur Provincial Park, which is insane, but again, it's Centrosaurus. Whereas, again, having that, here's a stegosaur plate next to a Diplodocus pelvis, next to an Allosaurus femur, just along from a Barosaurus tail is,
it is fun.
I've not been to that many places, but I've never seen anything like it.
It is the shake and bake of dinosaurs, and we get everything from juvenile individuals all the way up through adults. So you get all different types of age ranges. And then we also, there's 1,500 bones still left on the wall that weren't removed. So, I mean, that's a huge volume of dinosaur fossils for people to be able to see. But we also have fossils that people can walk right up to and touch that are still in the quarry wall. And that is a really unique experience for a lot of people. You can go to, sites like the Mammoth site or the Waco Mammoth site or other, like the Centrosaur bone beds at Dinosaur Provincial. But unless you have that opportunity, especially as a visitor or as a non-paleontologist, to be able to walk up and actually touch these fossils that are still embedded in the rock, still where they've lain, for the last 150 million years, that's a really unique experience. And so that's something that's really cool for visitors to be able to come up to our park and see all these fossils that we have not removed. They are exactly where they have laid since they were fossilized. And to be able to walk right up to that wall and put your hands on it is a really cool experience that not a lot of people get to have.
What does that mean for you as the the monument paleontologist? Because therefore everything you've just said, as a museum or as a collection and as a building, that's not like almost any other museum or collection on Earth. So with your like management hat on, what does that mean in terms of the display and the research and the interaction with the public and the rest of it?
Yeah, it's actually, I think it's really great because it gives people that interactive experience without needing to be a digital experience, which I think is really important to have those tactile moments. But it can lead to some challenges. You know, the fossils that people can reach and touch do get dirty, for instance. You know, you get several 100,000 people touching them a year. And so they do get grimy and dirty. So you have to clean them off. The quarry wall, as it is entirely, is very tall. So we don't want visitors just go clamoring around on it because we wouldn't want somebody to fall. So we do have to keep an eye on people. We do have some barriers to keep people from being able to just willy-nilly go rock climbing on the quarry wall, which could be damaging to the fossils as well. The wall accumulates a lot of dust and a lot of lint. And so we have to, just this past winter, I had two interns who worked for me for 12 weeks. And that was their job, is they climbed around on the quarry wall attached to ropes and harnesses and had to wear helmets. And they had backpack vacuums on that are battery operated vacuums so that they could go across the entire wall and vacuum all the lint and dust and dirt off of that. So we have to do that on a, kind of a regularly schedule to keep it clean.
I mean, that sounds like a fourth bridge operation, which as a phrase may mean nothing to you. There's a giant bridge we have in the UK, and famously, but I am absolutely certain it is apocryphally, it took like 7 years to cover it in paint that would, or the protective layer, which would last about 7 years. So the idea was that as soon as the guys finished putting the first coat on, they would go back to the start and start putting the second coat because it just finished wearing off.
It's like the Golden Gate Bridge here.
Exactly.
Yep.
Golden Gate Bridge.
You have got the same phrase. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
But,
and it is something that, you do have to clean. But then also, if I have a researcher come to visit, I have to have them in the appropriate safety gear so that they can go up on the wall safely, so that we don't have to worry about them falling off the wall. That's not always been the case for the last 100 years. They just kind of let people scamper around like pack rats on the wall with, if you fall, oh no, don't hit the bones on your way down. Rules and practices have changed. So now everybody has to go through basically like a safety class and a pseudo rock climbing class of how to access this wall, how to rappel, how to get around it safely. So it does create some very unique management challenges.
The idea that, whose bones are we protecting here? Are we protecting the people going up there, or are we protecting the bones in the fossil? Yeah, I thought so.
People heal. You can't. You can glue them back together, but it's preferable if you don't have to. So yeah, you'd be more worried about the specimen than the faller or fally.
Now, I wrote down a word on my little notepads that I've got by here, which I would like some explanation to how on earth that you deduce what happened here. And that word is clams. So there are clams. You say mixed in. Can you explain to us you can work out what happened here by these particular species of clam?
Yeah, so these species of clam that we get that are found in this river channel would have lived on the bottom of the river channel. And when we find all of these fossils, the majority of these clam fossils, they're all popped open. So think of like your New England clam bake or, your clam chowder. You're steaming those clams and they all pop open, right? So that you can eat your clam chowder. It's kind of like that with the clams that we find in this river, this ancient river system, is that most of them are popped open. And so that tells us that they went through some sort of drying phase where maybe they were exposed, where there wasn't water normally in their channel, or there wasn't enough running water to keep them healthy and alive. And so they're dying and just kind of popping open. So it's kind of sad. But there's actually more clams on the quarry wall than there are dinosaur bones. I'm really glad we didn't name it Clam National Monument because I don't think as many people would have come.
or very specific people. So that basically tells you that, you know, these clams have all died in the same sort of experience, which tells you it must have been a drought where they're exposed, where the river isn't flowing, or that. I like that a lot. That's like Sherlock Holmes deduction. It's good.
And that's the kind of fun things. That's why you can't just look at the vertebrate fossils. So there's a whole big picture. You have to look at the types of sediment that we get in the quarry, the different types of animals that we get, how are they posed, who's living in there. Like, we don't find fish fossils in the quarry, but we know fish live in rivers. So why weren't they preserved?
Yeah. No fish is a pretty good indication there's something weird going on.
Yeah.
Presumably because the fish could get away and swim into the river. Whereas,
exactly. Or be in other places. Yeah.
But, which also means there's almost certainly some insane mass mortality of millions of fish who all got into the last bit and the last bit and the last bit.
Yeah. I always like to remind people that when we think about this drought event, would have smelled awful. I mean, you've got this river that's dropped down. You've got that mucky mud smell that you already have anyway, that really wet smell. Then you've got all these dead and maybe dying animals in and around this river channel. And what we don't find on these skeletons are scavenging marks from say theropods. We don't get a whole lot, like very, very few bones that have been scavenged upon. So that tells us that these animals probably didn't lay uncovered for a long period of time. And we also have a lot of, like Dave mentioned, a lot of necks and tails, which, have a lot of tissue, a lot of sinew holding these things together. You think of like when you eat your goose neck or your turkey neck or whatever. Not a lot of people eat that part of the bird, but we get a lot of those kinds of articulations or of complete specimens on the quarry wall. These things probably got covered up reasonably quick, but not to a depth that they couldn't be decayed by modern day, or not modern day for them, consumers. So what we do see on those fossils are tons and tons of bug borings. So we know that these carcasses are being broken down by insects and eaten up and chewed up because we get the little bug bites on the bone surface.
Wow.
So that's another really cool part of the story where they're not being exposed, they're not being scavenged upon by other predators and scavengers, but they are being scavenged upon in a way by insects. So those are animals that are able to bore down into these carcasses, maybe down through the sediment, and break these big bodies down. So it probably smelled to high heaven. It's probably a lovely maggoty mess.
I'm not sure rotting clams would have smelled any nicer either, to be honest.
No, that's true. Yeah. Oh.
You could probably add them to the list. I mean, I was waving my hand during that bit because I know of only one bone with bite marks, because I wrote it up.
Exactly, the baby apatosaur.
So Diplodocid we called it in the end.
Yeah.
But it was just such a surprise. Again, hopefully people listen to this podcast before, but I bring it up now mostly because it's such a great example of sharing stuff. So Dan Chury, who I believe was your predecessor, had just posted on Facebook this photo of, hey, look at this bone bite on the end of this little femur. And of course, this is what I was massively into, well, then and now. I just suddenly go, what the hell? I'd heard there were none in Dinosaur National Monument, and lo and behold, there's one, and it's on a young animal. So all the alarm bells going off in my head. And then, again, as you say, it's like there's one out of thousands of bones.
Yeah.
That's really, really weird. So absolutely tells you it's an unusual system that's going on. And that paper entirely came out of a Facebook post of someone going, hey, look at this, and the right person seeing it and going, oh my god, that's more interesting than you realize. And
absolutely,
lo and behold, it came together.
And it's a good bone to show people too, because it's really down low.
Yeah.
And so it's easy to take people over to show them. And there's a little shed Allosaurus tooth really near it. So it's a nice bone for people to be able to see. And it's also handy because it's basically the drumstick of this poor little juvenile sauropod. And so it's easy to translate that into, like when you're showing this to the general public and they're like, well, what bone is that? And it's like, well, when you eat a drumstick off a turkey or, a chicken, when you're enjoying that, that's basically what you're gnawing on. And that's what the allosaur was probably doing as well.
Yeah, I mean, I was delighted because, of course, because you weren't there, we couldn't get at. Well, I was there with Matt Wadles. We couldn't get access onto the wall, and of course, I wanted to see the one bone that I published on, even though I hadn't seen it at that point. With Dan being the on-site expert. And yeah, was then delighted to find, oh no, it's just there, so you can see it. And they let us go through the fence to take some photos. So yeah, that was extremely serendipitous because I was, when I realized, I walked in and going, it's going to be hidden at the top behind something else, under something else. And it's right there. So it's
very
delightful.
Convenient.
Yeah. So on the subject of research, because I've done the opposite, we had to talk about my papers where I said we need to talk about your research. So let's shift the conversation dramatically. So how long have you been there now?
I have been there just over 6 years.
Yeah. So what have you been researching on?
She's been busy hoovering.
Yes, I know she has. Yeah.
And climbing things and doing all the things. You can't expect her. She's been having to stop people sticking their bits of things. You can't expect her to do research as well, Dave.
I can, because she's already told us she got the interns to do it. She's not hoovering.
Yeah, but you know what interns are like.
They are great. We couldn't operate without interns. They bless my interns. They get to do a lot of the fun, cool work, to be honest. I get to sit around writing money to hire more interns. So that's the way that usually ends up working. A lot of my job as the paleontologist at the monument is actually to facilitate other people's research. One of my big jobs is basically to be a cheerleader, to bring other people in, to find people that I know have these research interests and get them engaged in doing research in the park. So I think that's one of the coolest aspects of my job is I get to work with a lot of really interesting researchers and help them to facilitate their research. So there's a paper that is about to come out on dinosaur feeding niche partitioning and looking at isotopic values on their teeth. We just had a great paper come out this week on the geology of the quarry sandstone and the surrounding Morrison Formation and how all of that was deposited. A hugely important geologically descriptive paper that hadn't been done yet. So facilitating that kind of research is definitely a big part of my job. And writing up my own research, unfortunately, is not always a big part of my job. That's not what they want to pay us money to do, unfortunately, these days. But one project that I do have in process from the dinosaur quarry is we're looking at a juvenile Stegosaurus that was excavated from the quarry in the late 1970s. And this is one of one handful of juvenile stegosaurs that are known from the world. And it's the most complete. And so while this animal didn't have plates or spikes, unfortunately, which would have been awesome, other specimens have those. It did have a lot of paired elements. So what I'm working on with a researcher named Ashley Paust is we're going to be, we've just started to do the process of looking at this animal from a ontogenetic standpoint. So we have CT scanned some of these limb bones, trying to see if we can see lags or lines of growth within those bones, those growth rings inside the bones. And we weren't really able to see those very well through the CT scanner. So we're looking at other non-destructive means, trying to get, access to like a synchrotron or something like that. But also, since we do have those paired elements, we're going to be doing bone histology on one of the femora and one of the humeri. So we're going to be studying the upper arm bone and the lower arm bone or the lower leg bone. Yeah, so we're going to cut them up and look inside of them and figure out how old baby Steggy was when it died. But one of the aspects of this project, too, is that in this area, not within the park, but just outside of the park, is also the largest known Stegosaurus that was ever collected.
Oh, excellent.
Larger than Apex at the American Museum that was recently gone to auction. So this is the largest Stegosaurus that has ever been discovered. And so we're going to hopefully be sectioning that specimen as well and then comparing that to other histological samples that have been done and trying to kind of get a better understanding of how quickly stegosaurs grew both in their youth and then later as they get giant.
So just how small is this small one?
Oh, it's so adorable.
It's baby, but of course that means everything from about 20 centimeters to about 4 meters. So it hasn't narrowed it down much.
So this is about the size of a medium dog.
Oh, wow.
A medium dog.
Yeah,
That's tiny.
Or a fox. Yeah, it is tiny.
Wow. I didn't realize it was anything that small.
It's adorably small, but it's not a hatchling.
Yeah,
but that's still so cute. That is basically when you can adopt them.
Yes, they would have been perfect on a leash.
So the other question I was going to ask is, how much of it have you got? Because when you said we don't have plates and spikes, and that I was then waiting for, or a head, a neck, a tail, most of the legs, any of the ribs, half
it's
the
just a kneecap or something,
fingers, toes. Yeah, this is what there was genuinely the paper I did with Matt and Andy Farkey a few years ago when we were looking at ontogeny, and there was one paper I found, and it said something like, the specimen is nearly complete, and then the list of elements was like 8, and it was like, this is not nearly complete. This is so fragmentary as to barely register as a decent specimen. So I know, I'm not accusing you, but I just know how grossly exaggerated we've got a really good one can be. So
our specimen
how good is this?
It's good for baby stegos. It's good. It's got the arms and the legs and some some ribs. I mean, the useful bits.
Yeah, but for something that size, that really is very, very good.
And when we think about the Carnegie Quarry in general, we do have several stegosaur specimens preserved, some really nice stegosaurus material. There's actually an amount of one of our stegosaurs at the Nebraska State Museum where Ash Paus is actually based out of. So we do have a lot of adult stegosaurus material on the quarry wall, but the thing we don't have are skulls. We don't have stegosaurus skulls on the wall. And again, skulls are in general pretty rare, but of course to find a baby stegosaurus skull would be just the boon of the world. We would be thrilled. But unfortunately, this specimen doesn't have a skull preserved.
As well, stegosaurus skulls, that's only like the size of a small dog. Because their heads are much smaller than...
Well, yeah, I mean, their heads are silly. I mean, their heads are tiny compared to their body, and they're these funny elongate things. They kind of remind me of like a horse skull and how long and narrow they kind of are. But you really don't get too many stegosaurus skulls preserved in the fossil record in general. So it's not terribly surprising. I mean, you do get, shed teeth and things like that. But it is unfortunate because even at Dinosaur National Monument, I call it kind of the Disneyland of paleontology sometimes, because we have had so many skulls preserved on the quarry wall. There have been 5 Camarasaur skulls that have been found. Really nice Camarasaur skulls, not junky ones. We get Patasaur diplodocid skulls, and then one of the world's best Allosaur skulls was found on the quarry wall. Yeah, we have people from all over the world come study it. We have people constantly wanting to take it through CT scanners. It's a very, very popular skull because it's so well preserved in 3 dimensions.
I'm a big fan of Allosaurus at the moment. I like them. Dave doesn't like their arms, so...
Oh, they just want to give you hugs.
Exactly, that's what it must be for. Because there's no other reason to have them other than to maybe, move things that you can't see.
Into your mouth.
You can't put stuff in your mouth with them. That's the thing with Allosaurus. They've got
you can hold your food down. I mean, if you want to give your sauropod a hug, I think those arms would have been somewhat useful. I mean, it's got those big claws.
Well, that's right, true. Yeah. So my thing is always that it doesn't add up, inverted commas, in that I don't think most big theropods are tackling big prey. In which case, why would you try and grab something under your body where you can't see it, rather than with your head, which you can see and has the teeth in it? That seems a much easier way of grabbing and killing something than trying to... I mean, I'm sure they are. They wouldn't be that big. They wouldn't be that well muscled. They wouldn't have claws that curved with very strong ligamental bits and all the other stuff that's going on in there, and the slightly offset thumb. Those arms are definitely really weirdly good at grippy stuff. It's just very counterintuitive because animals don't basically animals don't do that. You don't try and grab and kill your dinner with something you can't see.
But you can hold on to it while you're enjoying your baby back ribs.
I think exactly.
Right, but then they don't need to be quite that big and quite that strong if it's already dead.
I think they're just carrying it about. I think they're just moving it away from other allosaurs. They're just going to have my picnic over here. That's what it is. And they've got to keep hold of it, stop the other allosaurs getting at it, because they're snatchy.
People have suggested stuff like that. So it's not such a... I don't think it's true, but it's not such a strange, tricky suggestion. It's like people have talked about this stuff.
Written a little kid's book, and in it, an allosaur uses it, a baby one, very like hatchling sort of size, like a small dog or something. But yeah, it literally uses it to pick up a cricket ball and run away with it. So that's what I think they're doing.
Why not?
They wouldn't be able to get much of a action.
No, it just wants the cricket ball. It's just picking it up.
The throw's going to be limited. Fair enough. Talking about quarries and research, if I'm wrong, we're going to have to edit this bit out, but weren't you involved in some of the MyGatMore stuff as well?
Yeah, I did get to work on some of the MyGatMore stuff. MyGatMore was one of the first Morrison Formation quarries that I got to work on with my husband, John Foster. He worked on that a lot, and we worked on some of the taphonomy of that quarry, which is very different than the Carnegie quarry, because it's a mudstone quarry.
Yeah. So
the MyGatMore quarry is like, if you're going to dig, this is like the easiest dinosaur quarry to dig, in the sense that the rock is really nice and soft. It's full of plant chunks, and it's just got so much bone in it. It's got a lot of apatosaurs. It's got a lot of, it's got allosaurs. It's got the wonderful dinosaur Mymore pelta, late Jurassic ankylosaur. It's got some stegosaurs. It's got a lot of the same types of dinosaurs that we get at the Carnegie quarry. It's just, this is more of like a cow pond. It's more of like a wet, always wet environment. Some drying events, but mostly wet, where these animals are coming in and maybe getting stuck in the mud or dying near this big watering hole type of situation. It's a fabulous quarry to work, very easy, and it's been being worked since the early 1980s.
Oh, I didn't realize it was that old. So
yeah. It's been continuously worked almost every single summer since then. With the exception of COVID and a few other small outliers, it's been continuously worked, and it's still producing, and it's huge. And it continues going. It'll never be fully excavated, but it's a very, very large dinosaur quarry. It also, similar in age to Dinosaur National Monument's Carnegie quarry.
Yeah, and then that one is the one which does have loads of big bite marks, as well as all the insect stuff, because I've seen some of them. Yeah.
Yeah, it's got tons of scavenging marks. So I mean, if you've ever seen, unfortunately, if you ever saw Dinosaur Fight Club, I apologize first. And secondly, if you saw a dinosaur bone that they said had been chewed on screen, it was from MyGatMore, regardless of which episode you were watching.
Oh, right. So is it the red-tailed hawk that you get in like every single documentary?
Exactly. Even if it's an eagle, it's a red-tailed hawk.
Yeah, it's just the same cord, right? So it's a chewed-up bone, and that's a chewed-up Diplodocus and a Stegosaurus and a Triceratops and an Iguanodon.
Yeah, it's always the stand-in for the chewed bone. So yes, MyGatMore had tons of chewed up animals, lots of snacking going on there by the theropods coming in for their rotten dinosaur barbecue fest. It was a good place to be a dinosaur.
Nice. And it's because of the scavenging marks that this isn't just a place where there's been a big drought and everything's died at the same time.
Yeah, and a lot of these bones are really rotten. Like you can tell that they've been sitting in water and soaking up water, and the ends are flaking off. And the way that we study these bones through taphonomy is definitely different than what you see at the Carnegie quarry, where you can tell it was undergoing these drying events. Whereas at MyGatMore, things seem to stay a lot wetter and a lot damper over a much longer period of time. And those animals are not being covered up with sediment as quickly as what the fossils at the Carnegie quarry were. And we also get a lot of bones that have been stepped on by dinosaurs who were walking through these areas. So after these animals were dead, other large animals, probably sauropods, are still wandering around this area and stepping on their dead conrads and breaking their bones as well.
So you get basically trace fossils in actual fossils as well.
Yeah.
That is like doubling down. That's like...
Yeah.
Boom. Love that.
There's whole papers on it's called trampling. Trampling effect and bone breakage. You see it even in modern stuff. So as ever, I think some of the first papers on this were done on something like wildebeest.
Exactly.
In
Kay
East Africa.
Berensmeyer's really done a lot of the pioneering work on this stuff. You would find bones that would be broken at like a 90-degree, where part of it had gotten stepped on and shoved down into the mud, and the other part stayed straight up. So it's very cool. It was an amazing site to work at. So cool. And they run public dinosaur digs. So if you're ever in the U.S. and it's located in western Colorado, just outside the town of Fruita near Grand Junction, you can sign up to take your kiddos or your family or your friends out on a public dinosaur dig and sit there for the afternoon and the morning excavating dinosaurs.
See, do you trust kids? I mean, I'm not saying that if I were a kid and I was on a site and I found something that I thought I could put that in my pocket. I mean,
well, so that's a very good point. So yes, since this site is located on public land, it's on Bureau of Land Management land. The participants that come to these excavations are not allowed to keep any of the fossils they found. They definitely go to the museum and are kept at the museum. The kids are sometimes some of the more trustworthy ones that you're out there with, because they're so pure and they're so excited to be contributing and to be finding this stuff. And we go over the rules and regulations and talk to them about this. And they have so much fun. And it's usually either kids who are super enthusiastic and have always wanted to do this, and they go out there and they do it, or they think they always wanted to do it, and then they get out there and they find out how much hard work it is and how hot it is, and they sit under the tent with their dinosaur book, reading their book or playing their video game where they're excavating dinosaurs in a video game instead of actually doing the real thing. Sometimes it's the parents who are more enthusiastic than the kids, but still it's a good chance for people to get outside and see what the actual work is like, even though honestly it's kind of the easiest dinosaur quarry you could ever dig out, because you can drive right up to it. You have water, you have a bathroom, you have sunscreen, you've got the soft, nice rock. It's a very, very easy dinosaur quarry to work at. It's not, it's not like a death march to get there.
Turning back off that angle. So yeah, when I was at the monument, so one thing Matt Wadle told me is just how hard the rock is in the monument and how incredibly difficult it is to excavate. And he said, at least, that the only reason it ever really got done is this is Andrew Carnegie money, where you could just throw money at the problem. And even if you tried to do it now with modern tools and techniques, you'd need an army of people for decades to make that kind of progress.
Absolutely. Yeah. So when Andrew Carnegie was funding the work that was taking place at Dinosaur National Monument, he hired Earl Douglas, who was a mammal paleontologist, and Earl got sent out to excavate these dinosaurs at the Carnegie, and they hired local miners occasionally, because there is a lot of mining that takes place in Utah. They would hire miners. They had crews who were just really hard workers. I mean, a lot of this stuff was hand quarried. The rock is as hard as concrete. It's very, very hard sandstone in the most part. Very, very hard rock to excavate. They used dynamite. They would blast. They worked year round. We have pictures of them working in winter in the snow, and it can get really snowy here. We can get like 3 feet of snow here.
And it wasn't covered then, which it is now.
No, not at all. Yeah, they were working exposed out in the elements. They had horses who would bring down the fossils and the carts of fossils. And then they would have to ford a river with this material to get it to the first train, to take it down a set of mountains, and then load it onto the second train to then take it back to Pittsburgh. And so that in itself was very, very costly and very expensive. And so it was through Andrew Carnegie's love of paleontology and wanting to have these museums where the public could come and see fossils that he was able to really facilitate this work. And several times they kind of tried to pull the plug and say, oh, we have enough dinosaur fossils. I think, maybe we could go work somewhere else, or maybe, you've got enough. And it was really Earl Douglas who saw the potential of this place and really loved it. He and his wife had a cabin there near the quarry. They were raising their son in the what becomes the park, and they really loved it there. And so Earl really encouraged them to continue the work there for a number of years. until finally the plug kind of got pulled, and Earl was able to work with the Smithsonian and later the University of Utah to continue that work a little while before he was tasked with returning back to Pittsburgh. But he really loved working there, and it was really, really hard, backbreaking work. And yeah, like Dave mentioned, the site wasn't even covered until the 1950s.
But it is one of those things that I've done where it's like, yeah, this is really fun for 2 or 3 weeks, and after that, it stops being fun, and I want a burger and a shower and internet.
In that order.
Yeah, probably. But like, yeah, doing it in the 1940s or 1920s on a hillside in winter is
with horses.
Yeah,
with horses. Yeah,
well,
horses
they'd
and
probably
dynamite.
be warmer. I'd be happier with the horses, to be honest. At least they've got some heat coming off them. And of course, that just made me realize, because of course, as you say, Diplodocus and Apatosaurus out of that and into the Carnegie. So for anyone who doesn't realize, that's the quarry from which came the Diplodocus carnegii, which is the one that was cast and sent everywhere. So the Natural History Museum.
That one's actually from Wyoming.
Is it? Is it not?
Yeah, Wyoming's from,
Oh, I'm wrong.
Dippy's from Wyoming. Yeah, Dippy's
Ah.
from Wyoming, but Apatosaurus louisii, which is directly facing Dippy, is the very first dinosaur that was found here at the Carnegie Quarry. And so that was their real sweet spot, is, Andrew Carnegie already had Dippy named after him, and so they named Apatosaurus louisii after Andrew's wife, which was really a smart move.
Well, I was gonna say, we found this giant, ugly monster.
No, she's beautiful. She's beautiful. What are you talking about?
I agree, but paleontology in the early 1900s does not treat sauropods quite as gently as we might.
This is true. But she is a beautiful beastie. I mean, when you walk around her and underneath her, I mean, the sheer scale of that specimen alone, of the holotype that you can see on display at the Carnegie, is just, it's hard to put into words, because I had the privilege of going and seeing it just a few years ago for the first time, and I wanted to cry. It was amazing. Just, you don't realize how large they are until you're standing underneath them and you can barely reach their belly. And what really hit it home for me is I was walking around their Jurassic Hall, looking at almost all the dinosaurs that they have on display in their Jurassic Hall come from the Carnegie Dinosaur Quarry, with the exception of Dippy.
That's what I'd assumed it was, because I thought basically everything there was from
everything for the most part, other than Dippy. But what really hit me, that it took me, I honestly swear, I felt like an idiot when I realized this. It took me about a day to realize, after looking at all the other specimens. I walked past their Allosaurus and I was like, oh, cute, they have a juvenile Allosaurus, whatever. And then I just kind of kept looking at, the sauropods and the ornithischians. And I finally made my way back around to the Allosaur and was reading the label and looking at it. And I'm like, wait a minute, that's the Allosaurus from the quarry that was excavated in 1924. That's the same Allosaurus we have on display at the quarry that looks giant in our building. But when you put it underneath an Apatosaurus, it looks like a tiny, squat little thing. And so it was kind of funny just to have them next to each other for the scale alone, because Apatosaurus really dwarfs an adult Allosaurus. It was really remarkable. So keep that in mind if you get to visit the Carnegie Quarry when you're wandering around the Camptosaurus, the Dryosaurus, the Stegosaurus, the baby Camarasaurus. Those all come from Dinosaur National Monument. And the juvenile Camarasaurus that they have on display is still to this day one of the most complete sauropods in the entire world, and definitely in the late Jurassic. It's a really, really beautiful specimen.
Oh, it's missing like a rib and one vertebra or something.
Exactly, like a toe bone. Yeah. It's just fabulous. Anyway, and that was written up by Gilmore in 1915, 1919, something like that. But it's still one of the main specimens that helped paleontologists understand how sauropods stood and where their legs were at underneath them. Yeah, what they actually look like when they're put together. Yeah, it does have a head. It has a beautiful head.
We talked about sauropod heads with Paul Upchurch. People have been made aware that Yeah, a sauropod head is a rare thing.
Is a rare thing.
It is a gem, yeah, and especially to have a puppy head of a little baby Camarasaurus is remarkable. It's a beautiful head.
Have we got any more questions to ask you, Rebecca? Because you've covered everything so well.
What didn't we ask you?
You need to tell us.
Oh, well, I mean, one thing I definitely want to mention is that, yes, while the Carnegie Quarry holds all these amazing dinosaurs that we have preserved, it's a lot of the small microvertebrate quarries that we have outside of the main quarry that really help fill in this picture of what these animals look like that were living under the feet of these dinosaurs. We have some of the first late Jurassic frogs that have ever been found.
Frogs?
We have
You've got amphibians.
frogs. We have frogs. We have salamanders. We have early geckos or geckoids.
That's cool.
Yes, that's a paper. It just came out in the last few years. We have tons and tons of small reptiles. We have sphenodonts. We have snails. We have all sorts of. We have fish. We have all sorts of wonderful little tiny critters that are preserved in these pond deposits off to the side of the main river channel. And they really inform us more on what life was like for all the other different animals that are living under the feet of the dinosaurs and running around. Even small, crocodiles like Hoplosuchus, which was found actually in the Carnegie Quarry. But, it gives you kind of a bigger, better picture of what the entire environment looks like. And that's not something that you can get at most Jurassic sites, where you can understand all of the tiny animals all the way up to the largest ones that lived. So that's one of the really unique things about Dinosaur National Monument as far as the late Jurassic rocks go, is that we have kind of this really great picture of the paleo landscape of all of the different animals that were living and occupying this environment, which is really cool. And so we get a lot of interesting researchers who come from all over the world with many different lines of thought to study this environment. And that's really awesome. And there's so much more to learn. We have so many microvertebrates that are not being worked on, tiny little critters. And this is where a lot of our new holotypes are coming out of. So if you're a microvertebrate researcher, definitely give us a shout.
If you find some more pterosaur stuff, let me know.
We would love to find more pterosaur stuff. Pterosaurs are like the hardest fossil to preserve, I swear.
Just frighteningly absent from the Morrison. I mean, we know they're there. We got some bits, but
yeah,
given I know, they're pterosaurs, they don't preserve very well. There's not, right, but
you need to have a talk with them about that.
So much out of the Morrison. You should have 50, 100 times more than you actually have, which is
they got
odd.
frogs. And they don't have pterosaurs, they got frogs.
Yeah, if you're getting frogs and you're getting geckos, you should be getting a bit more on the pterosaur front.
If you know anybody with micro CT scanners, we've got tons and tons of bulk material with bone exposed that just needs scanned before it's prepped. There's, only a handful of people who can do that level of micro preparation. And these days with micro CT scanners, we can do a lot of the work ahead of time without just diving in and destroying stuff.
It's really amazing, Rebecca. Thank you. Are you on any of the social media-y type things that people might do, or is the Morrison Formation got an account which we should be following on Instagram?
Yeah,
Morrison.com
or
Dinosaur National Monument is present on all major social media channels, so you can find us on your Instagram and Facebook, and we'll leave it at that. And then there's also, you can find me on Bluesky. I personally don't have a public-facing Instagram or Facebook page at this time, but keep your eyes out. Maybe again in the future that'll reappear.
A handle on Bluesky.
Dino Chick.
Brilliant. Why go anywhere else if that's your handle? That's amazing. At the end of this now, obviously you know this, so you listen to every single episode, that we end every single Liz's episode by saying goodbye, by making Dave cry, which is we all have to make the noise of our favourite dinosaur. So you might choose to do an Apatosaurus honking type situation, I don't know. I'm going to be an Allosaur, and I'm going to growl. Dave is going to basically be a Dave and groan probably. But after 3, say goodbye to everybody. 1, 2, 3.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Terrible Lizards, and thanks as well for going to that social media you never seem to update and sharing the podcast there too. You could also go to patreon.com/Terrible Lizards to support the show and access a wealth of extra content. Get in touch with us via terriblelizardspod@gmail.com, and while you're here, do check out Dave and Izzy's books. Flappy bye-bye.